So hello everyone, and welcome to the next webinar in our Data Lifecycle Optimization series. And this one will be focusing on enterprise business intelligence. Okay, so my name is Anthony Martin, and I'm a solutions architect with Pragmaticworks. And in my role, I'm responsible really for helping our clients make the most out of their investments in the Microsoft Data Platform. I have a deep technical background and have been building business intelligence solutions for around a dozen years now. I'm a Microsoft certified IT professional. I have 3 certifications there, one for business intelligence development, another for database development, and a third for database administration. You can email me at amartin@pragmaticworks.com, and also please check out my blog at anthonymmartin.wordpress.com. Okay, so in this session we'll be talking about our approach and how we discuss and review our strategy around business intelligence with our clients. If you haven't seen our previous sessions, I encourage you to visit the website where you can find those previously recorded sessions that we talked about architecture and configuration, availability and continuity, as well as performance and optimization. Looking ahead, you'll also want to remember to register for our upcoming session on big data and predictive analytics, which is going to be this Thursday and will be presented by Adam Jorgensen. Okay, so what's the solution? So in our first DLO session, my colleague Jason Straight shared a story with you about how his local highway system wasn't prepared for the growth of the city. And over time, jokingly, but probably not all that far from the truth, resembled image A over here. So that rat's nest evolved due to a poor foundation and improper planning. So to correct that problem and turn the highway system into something that more closely resembles image B, it took a lot of time, money, planning, and probably a whole lot of road rage incidents in the meantime. So, just like the abstract example of that highway system, your organization's enterprise business intelligence system requires a process for optimization. Most of the time, the clients that I speak with recognize that optimization is needed, but they often don't know where to start. They're so busy making, that image A work that they don't have the time to define the strategy to move towards something that more closely resembles image B. So our idea with data lifecycle optimization is to cover these areas here. So it all starts with building that foundation. So in optimizing the enterprise business intelligence pillar, you really need to make sure that you build that correct foundation. And with starting with that, really that's going to start with an assessment to understand where you currently are before you can start to build that roadmap on where you want to get to. So typically this assessment is going to talk about the various components of a business intelligence system. So that's, really data modeling, ETL, typically some sort of cube semantic layer, and then a data presentation layer. So we'll be talking in the upcoming slides a lot about these various components. In terms of growing with your needs, so with the proper foundation in place, you can focus on growing with your organization's needs over time. So depending on your level of maturity here, this could be the need to progress from siloed departmental solutions to true enterprise solutions, or maybe just dealing with the need to incorporate new types of data sources or even larger volumes of data. In order to be successful here, even with the right foundation and being able to grow, you need to be able to allow change in scale. So traditional BI approaches and technologies, while providing a single version of the truth, really frequently struggle to have a backlog of requests due to the care required to deploy these solutions without breaking anything. I was just actually speaking to a client yesterday, and they were estimating that they have over 3 years worth of project work in their queue. So to adapt to these quickly changing business questions, we need to review the processes and technology to enhance that speed of delivering these solutions. And then finally here, reinvesting in your data. So as you progress along this journey of optimizing your business intelligence system, you can slowly over time begin to spend less and less time and money in making image A work for you, that horrible rat's nest of a highway system there, and use those savings to start to invest in growing with your needs or new areas that can drive additional value within your organization, like perhaps big data and predictive analytics solutions. Okay, so the first component of Enterprise BI that we're going to explore is data modeling. And to be honest, this is really a topic that could very easily consume a month worth of webinars, and at a much deeper technical level than I want to discuss in this session per se. So, but when I do talk to the clients that I work with around data modeling, the first kind of area that I touch on is the differences between departmental solutions and enterprise solutions. So companies here that are going to be on the lower end of that maturity scale regularly have different departments within the org create their own data models to represent common entities that really should be the same across the organization. The common examples here are customer and product. So this lack of reuse here has a lot of negative impacts for just a purely departmental solution. And those can be the time and money spent to build practically the same solution, as well as really limiting your options for integration across all the departments in the org and all the business processes that really need to be put together to get that large picture of what's happening. So to address this, there's various data modeling methodologies out there. By far the one that I see being used the most and being the most successful with is the Kimball methodology. And in this methodology, it addresses kind of some of these reuse issues through something called conform dimensions, and also an excellent roadmap planning tool which they refer to as the business process matrix. So while developing and producing solutions in iterative sprints that consistently can produce business value on a recurring schedule is certainly a best practice for larger initiatives, the upfront planning and discovery that's going to go into the beginning of that really will drive the creation of that business process matrix and help address some of those issues with just purely siloed departmental solutions. Okay, so moving on to ETL. So data integration projects, typically revolve around, developing these ETL processes that are going to extract data from various data sources in the org, be it OLTP systems, ERP systems, various line of business applications that are out there. From there, we typically transform and shape those data sources and then load it to conform with that target dimensional model that we created in the previous phase. So really, in optimizing this area, I think it's all about standards, reusability, and auditing. I think your goal really here with your ETL processes and systems should be to come up with a standard set of naming conventions, a standard set of design patterns, so that everyone is developing as similar to each other as possible. And one of the most frustrating parts of troubleshooting ETL processes is when everyone is doing everything their own way, the way they like to do it. For example, a simple type 1 slowly changing dimension that you need to load. That shouldn't be done by developer A through a merge statement and through developer B through a data flow with a lookup and a bulk insert in the control flow pattern. Agreeing on those standard sets of behaviors and design patterns is going to make the development processes as well as the troubleshooting processes that much faster. One way and one tool to address that is our BI Express software. That can address that standardization challenge by adding in auditing and notification frameworks to a whole set of SSIS packages very quickly and easily. Additionally, you can create templates through BI Express that can have those common design patterns, and you can then reuse those common patterns throughout the organization. One too far there. Okay. So ETL, it's really not just SSIS. Today's data landscape is continuing to grow at a rapid pace in terms of both volume and variety of data. It is becoming more diverse than ever with both on-premise data sources as well as cloud-borne data sources in a variety of different forms that need to be processed across even different geographic locations. So the ability to adapt to these challenges is starting to move ETL beyond just traditional SSIS. Just last month, several new services were announced in the Azure platform, such as Data Factory, Stream Analytics, and support for the open source Apache Storm project. And these new projects and services are really the direction that ETL and data processing is heading into the future, and it is going to help address those changing data landscaping needs. Another thing that I want to bring to your attention here is a white paper that was just released 2 weeks ago by Microsoft, and this talks about extending a topic that I've actually blogged about in the past, and that is the work pile design pattern to an Azure-based solution, something that we actually cover in our SSIS Masters class. So a lot of interesting things happening in the ETL world, and again, it's starting to move beyond just traditional on-premise SSIS and being able to handle a lot of these challenges with changes in terms of data volume, as well as different geographic locations that you need to be processing data in, and different variety and structures of data sources. Okay. So OLAP technologies play really a very important part in a business intelligence system. These OLAP systems have specialized data structures that are optimized for reporting and analytical workloads, such as slicing and dicing of fact or transactional data across many different dimensions, as well as being able to pre-aggregate specific intersections of attributes. Additionally, the OLAP layer provides to you a much-needed semantic layer, and this semantic layer is going to add in usability enhancements in the form of business-friendly naming of objects. So no longer do we need to expose tables and entities, the way that the development team wants to, DBO dot, fact internet sales. We can provide the specialized meaning that is referred to within the business and not something that is going to meet the needs of database systems. Other things that you're going to add in this OLAP layer or this semantic layer is going to be user-based hierarchies as well as calculations. So within the Microsoft Data Platform, there's several different versions or flavors of OLAP technologies, and that's shown here by this line chart. So we have lots of different options ranging from Power Pivot for SharePoint, Analysis Services Tabular, and Analysis Services Multidimensional. And choosing the correct technology here comes to lots of different options to figure out which one makes the best choice for you, but really it comes down to differences in scalability as well as quite a difference in learning curve. So if you look at this line chart here, you can see in the far left-hand side our Power Pivot solution, while it has the lowest learning curve, or it's the easiest to pick up and use and to create and develop solutions with, it's also the least scalable. So the reason for that is while it's a very highly performing in-memory cube engine, it's also limited to the resources of the end user's laptop or desktop that is developing that Power Pivot solution. Power Pivot's an Excel-based solution, so you do have various limitations there. What's really nice about the Microsoft platform scalability story is that we can scale from a solution that we create in Power Pivot and upscale that to either Power Pivot for SharePoint or directly to Analysis Services Tabular. So Power Pivot for SharePoint is a specialized on-premise SharePoint installation. Power BI sites within SharePoint Online is kind of the same story here, except now we're using a cloud-based service in SharePoint Online. But what it does is it takes that Power Pivot model and scales it to the next level for you. Now we get the additional features and processing power of a server farm in our SharePoint environment, as well as the ability to add in security here and data refresh. So we can now take advantage of SharePoint security to determine who should and should not see this Power Pivot workbooks and the data behind it, as well as automating that data refresh. So the data sources in the Power Pivot model, that's that data that once you bring it in, it's static at that point in time. But that's not going to be ideal for a production-ready solution. We need to figure out how to automate that. And SharePoint and Analysis Services Tabular are two ways to do that. We can define some sort of schedule, daily, weekly, monthly, that the data sources that comprise that model are refreshed upon. So our next level, so Power Pivot for SharePoint Analysis Services Tabular is the next scaling option. And this can be upscaled directly from Power Pivot. Doesn't need to be the intermediate Power Pivot for SharePoint. And this is going to even add additional bells and whistles to allow our IT teams to scale this solution to increasing amounts of users, increasing amounts of data. One way it does this is through partitioning. So let's say, for instance, that you have a very large data set. You have data over several years worth of time. That data, besides the current month's data, that data is likely not changing. So why process that on a nightly basis? Why not just process that data that's changing? And that's a solution that partitioning can help you meet. Another bell and whistle scalability feature that we get with Analysis Services Tabular, as well as Analysis Services Multidimensional actually, is the ability for row-level security. So with this, you can not only design security solutions on who should access the given cube, but who should actually access specific rows of data within that cube model. All right, so SelfService BI. So the concept of SelfService BI, if you haven't heard of it, it really seeks to provide the ability for non-technical analysts and end users who know and understand internal business processes and the data that those business processes generate, the ability to create their own reporting and analytical solutions with little to no assistance from technical departments and teams. So this approach can be used to really help that backlog of buildup and work items that I mentioned earlier by allowing drastically shorter development cycles because these non-technical analysts and end users can create their own proof of concept solutions. And then you can even extend that. So once you determine that that proof of concept solution is viable and it's successful, it's valuable to the org, you can then start to work with your technical teams to figure out how you can extend and scale that solution across the other OLAP technologies that we saw before. So Power Pivot for SharePoint, Power BI if you're talking SharePoint Online, or Analysis Services Tabular. So what is really interesting about Self-Service BI is that it isn't a new concept. In fact, I'd be willing to really bet that your organization is already doing it to some degree today. Over the years, it has practically become a requirement that all business intelligence front tools allow the capability. And that capability is exposed through that export to Excel option. So while the activities that your data analysts and power users are performing may technically be considered self-service BI, they are definitely still struggling with these manually intensive and error-prone processes that need to be repeated on a frequent basis. And the technology around this has really extended and been built up over the last few years. And specifically the Microsoft solution around this, the Power BI platform, really meets these needs. And they're kind of spelled out here. So the Power BI platform, it's meant to tailor towards end users. So a lot of these components to Power BI are built right into Excel, and they allow you to discover and combine data sets both internal and external to the organization. It allows you to analyze and model that data together, as well as provides various tools and components to visualize and explore that data. Now, while the technology has really advanced here, and as cool as the Microsoft Power BI platform is in the compelling value proposition it has, you still need to think through a lot of other items in your self-service BI strategy. And some of these examples are going to be security. So even though you're trying to make data accessible to the larger organization, what are going to be the processes that you put in place on who can see what, who can't see it, the processes to get people access to certain data sets, and how do you know when you need to get to that more fine-grained row-level security models that might be required. Another area that you're going to need to consider here is you can't just purchase a technology, be it Microsoft Power BI, Tableau, some of these other self-service BI tools out here, and expect it to be the silver bullet. One of the complexities and one of the huge advantages that Enterprise BI provides is that simplified dimensional model. If you just purchase the solution and you have your end users trying to hit these transactional systems, they're going to be very quickly overwhelmed and stop using it altogether. Those transactional database schemas just aren't structured for reporting and analytics. They're very normalized data structures, they're typically very complex, and they're very hard for non-technical end users to analyze. So there still is the need for these technical teams to be brought in here, particularly around security. Another area is going to be around providing these kind of base data models. And thirdly, in training. So, even though these self-service technologies are meant to be very easy to use, there's going to need to be some sort of training to allow the various users in your organization how to best use it, what the various components can do, and really how to best, the best practices on how to use that. Okay, so moving on into the presentation area. From a Microsoft perspective, there's a lot of different technologies here, perhaps too many, but they have various needs, and the differences are going to depend on who the end user is in developing those presentation or data visualizations, the type of reporting that's going to be done. Are we looking to provide a solution that has ad hoc reporting, data exploration, dashboards, canned reports? And because of that, that's kind of led to the various tools that we have in the Microsoft stack. So that can be Excel pivot tables and charts, probably one of the most underrated technologies in my opinion. Power Map, specifically built for designing three-dimensional geographical data, as well as reporting services. Reporting services, to be honest, not one of my favorite technologies, but it does have some functionality that just doesn't exist in any of these other tool sets, and it does prove to be very valuable. And what I'm talking about there is specifically data-driven subscriptions, the ability to have an end user subscribe to a given report and have it sent to them on whatever frequency that they define. That feature is a huge win in a lot of organizations. You don't require someone to, every time that they want to see an insight, go to some given web page. Those insights are actually delivered to them in the format that they want on the schedule that they're looking for. And that's why reporting services still has some love coming from me there. Power View and Performance Point, two other technologies, and really I would say these kind of have a very similar purpose, data exploration and dashboarding. The difference between them is really who's going to be using them. Power View is more geared towards non-technical end users, and Performance Point is going to probably require really more of a technical background in order to create those data visualizations. So lots of different choices here. Determining which ones meet your needs. It's really not just one. Trying to say that I'm only going to deliver data visualizations through one of these probably isn't going to meet your organizational needs, and oftentimes you need to use a combination of them to really provide the most value to your organization. Okay, so this is kind of the next topic that I've touched on a little bit, but where should you report from? So you have a couple options here. You have your transactional database systems, you have your data warehouse, and then you have your analysis services cube layer that we talked about before. All of these different options have their own pros and cons associated with them. And really it's going to be latency and ease of use. So more for your operational reporting, when you need to understand what's actually happening in your operational systems right away. that could open up the possibility for reporting directly off a transactional database, or with SQL Server 2012 and SQL Server 2014, always on availability groups and read-only secondaries is an option here. But the downside of that is the structures of doing that reporting. They're not built for reporting and analytics. They're built for high throughput of transactions. Now, moving into data warehouse and the analytics analysis services cubes, these are going to provide data structures that are more optimized for reporting and analytics, but you have to deal with latency associated with getting the data there. So moving from transactional systems and other line of business applications in your environment to the data warehouse, you're going to have some latency in developing those ETL processes to load those systems. Now, you can certainly develop those ETL solutions to get near-time processing, but it's certainly not going to be real time. It's going to be up to 5 to 30 minutes delayed, depending on the type of design and skill of your ETL teams here. Okay. So once you figure out that data presentation layer and you figure out the correct technologies, where you're going to do that reporting from, the next piece that you need to work through is the collaboration piece. So, providing these reports in either Excel, reporting services, whatever the data visualization technology is, it's not going to be valuable if it's only available to you. We work as a part of teams, and we need to be able to share the insights that we curate across the broader organization. And within the Microsoft platform, we have a couple different options for that. We have really reporting services in native mode, as well as SharePoint on-premise and SharePoint Online. And all these technologies provide a different set of features that are going to allow you to share that data and insights that you create, as well as being able to connect with a variety of devices and platforms. So what I'm referring to here is within Power BI sites and SharePoint Online, all the Power View visualizations are being converted over from Silverlight to HTML5. And that opens up the broader spectrum of non-Windows devices to access these visualizations, so iPad devices and Android tablets. Additionally, what we're seeing from Microsoft is this mobile-first, cloud-first development paradigm that they're working on. And one of the other examples of that we're seeing in SharePoint Online is the Q&A service. And this Q&A service is a natural query language engine, and the idea behind it is that no matter how simple some of the data visualization tools that Microsoft can create, there's going to be some subset of your end users that are just going to want to ask a question and have the answers returned to them. And that's the idea behind Q&A. You can type an English language question to the various models that have been uploaded to the Power BI site. You don't need to first define what those questions are. The person asking the question doesn't need to specify at first what that model should be. They just type that question. The Q&A service is going to interpret the tables, the columns, the calculations within those models, figure out which model is the most appropriate, and then show a data visualization to them that answers that question. And this is a really interesting service. It's based off of Power View, so like Power View is very easy to change the visualization type. You can do the same thing through the Q&A service. It exposes it through, you can provide hints in your natural language question, or you can click on a kind of a side chart here of the data visualizations that are out there, so you can very quickly say, well, I didn't want to see this as a bar chart. I want to see it, since it has countries or states within it, maybe I want to see it as a map. So a lot of interesting new features and functionalities being added to SharePoint Online. Okay. And really this is the final slide that I wanted to speak to you about here. So I am going to give you some time back. Hopefully we have some questions out there. But this last piece is really figuring out how to allow change at scale. So, that area that I talked about before, the clients that I'm speaking to have these huge backlog of project items and prioritized lists that they're trying to work through. And the difficulties with keeping up with the speed that the business is requesting these new requests can be addressed through technology, SelfService BI being one of them, standardized ETL platforms, but as well as some of these other items that are kind of late to the business intelligence development framework. It's been around in our friends over in typical application development, such as source control, the idea and paradigm behind continuous integration, as well as unit testing. And these new items are really just starting to break through in the business intelligence development lifecycle, and really I think it's an integral part to allowing us to reach this change at scale. There's so many people that I still work with today that don't have source control systems in place for their ETL systems, for their database systems, for their cube layers, for their reporting layers. I urge you to take a look at Team Foundation Server, Visual Studio Online, even some of the open source controls systems that are out there, to start to get the various components of your business intelligence system under source control. It allows you to more flexibly move from dev to test to production, as well as capture errors and rollback errors, should you run into these issues. You can comment. There's so many different things that you can do with a source control system that I just don't see a lot of companies taking advantage of. Even if they're doing it in other application development, they're not doing it just yet for business intelligence. And I think that's a pretty big mistake. Another area here is unit testing. Unit testing in a BI perspective is a little bit complicated, but it's something that if you put the effort into it, again, it's going to allow that change at scale. There are some various models that I've seen out there that you can find on Codeplex, or as well as within PragmaticWorks' BI Express software. We do offer unit testing capabilities, and I really would highly recommend that you take a look at these. Another area to allow this change at scale is, if you're not already doing so, you really need to start to consider cloud platforms and technologies. Not only in the speed that they can offer to get you up and running, also the cost and flexibility from that perspective as well. So to only pay for what you're actually using. And from a business intelligence perspective, we're seeing that ability with Azure Infrastructure as a Service. Through that, what we can do is spin up various virtual machines that can comprise a portion of the business intelligence application. So whether that's, at first just dev test, or whether that's, trying to figure out, what the optimal SharePoint environment should look like. There's, in one of our last DLO sessions, I referenced an Azure Business Intelligence IaaS white paper that's out there. And that white paper is really excellent and is a great starting point to get started. It walks you through creating a highly available SharePoint, Power Pivot, and database solution, and it's repeatable. So once you have this and you figure out how to configure it to the shape and size that you want for your organization, in the Azure data center location that you want, if you're on the East Coast, if you're on the West Coast, if you're overseas, the size of the VMs that you want, even though you can scale those up and down, the starting point that you want to work with there, the way you can configure your disk subsystems to allow the appropriate throughput. You can define and configure that once and reuse that through PowerShell scripting that they walk you through in this IaaS white paper that's out there. Additionally, if PowerShell is too much for you, just getting started with the images that are available from the Azure Portal Gallery is a great place also to get started. There's various images that are out there, and when I say images, what that means is virtual machines that are imaged specifically for a specific type of workload. So there's images out there that you can say, I want to create a virtual machine, and I want to use this image as a starting point because I want to spin up a SharePoint environment, or I need to run SQL Server that's optimized for transactional workloads, or I need to spin up SQL Server that's optimized for data warehousing type workloads. Those images are all available and out there, and you can really get started very fast with PowerShell or just through the portal if you require that UI type interface. So that brings us to the end here. I hope you found this useful. We talked on a lot of different pieces and parts of how you can assess and optimize your enterprise business intelligence system, all the way from the data modeling to ETL, OLAP systems, data presentation and collaboration, and hopefully that you found something useful that you can point to do that initial assessment, build that roadmap for where you want to go, and then optimize and invest in your data going forward. So I'll give you some time back in your day if there weren't any additional questions out there.
We have a couple of questions if you have a few minutes.
I do.
Well, one of those questions is, how can they get a copy of the slides?
Yes, we'll post that on our Pragmatic Works blog site, and I'll also post it on mine as well, which you can find at anthonymmartin.wordpress.com.
Also, do you expect the next version of SharePoint on-premise to support things like QA&A and HTML5?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that next release of SharePoint we're seeing targeted towards sometime in the middle of 2015, and I would highly expect them to have a lot of the SharePoint Online features that we're seeing there today. Probably not the Q&A service, as there's a lot of server infrastructure and technology that goes into making that work. That's probably something that can only scale at a cloud level, but I would certainly expect to see HTML5 become to on-premise SharePoint, as well as the ability for allowing data refresh of Power Query connections.
Also, can you please share your opinion on tabular model versus traditional OLAP model?
Yes, so we definitely have some presentations that are previously recorded that speak to that in great detail. I think some of the main considerations there are going to be data volume, as tabular is an in-memory solution. If you're into the terabytes of data, it's potentially not something that you could consider at this point in time, but not everyone's there, and if you have enough RAM and memory in your machines, I would highly recommend the tabular model as a starting point because of that learning curve associated with it, as well as being able to start at a Power Pivot level and upscale to Power Pivot for SharePoint or Analysis Services Tabular. Another thing to consider here is, well, the downside is, if that data volume is too large, that Analysis Services multidimensional can have that, that hybrid in-memory cache, as well as that disk-based data storage, as well as handling, many-to-many relationships, parent-child relationships a little bit better at this point. You can do it in tabular, but it's going to require a little bit of DAX coding to make that work.
Also, do you think shared data sets allow self-service BI?
I think it's a component of self-service BI, and we're actually seeing that with Office 365 and SharePoint Online, the ability to define these initial data sets that can be reused and discovered across the organization. So define it once, allow others to discover that through a Power Query online search within the organization to find that. So yes, I think it is a component of self-service BI.
Okay, what is the future roadmap for SSRS and Performance Point? Will these products be end of life in future Microsoft releases?
That's a question I get all the time, and I don't have any particular insight there. I would say that SSRS is certainly likely to continue with its roadmap in enhancing the features and functionality. Performance Point, I honestly don't know. I could see that going several different ways, either rolled into other products, extended, or done away with, but I don't have any particular insight what that direction will be.
Well, where does the Power Query fit in?
Yes, so Power Query fits in that it provides the ability to discover both internal and external data sets that we talked about. So if it's pulling data from non-traditional data sources, like from the web, if it's pulling data from Facebook, Active Directory, all sorts of different data sources, as well as the ability to easily transform that, kind of like a self-service ETL tool, although you're limited on your options for a target, which is going to be an Excel workbook or the Excel data model or Power Pivot. So the ability to do those simple transformations through a GUI interface really meets a need that is there today.
All right, and someone had expanded on your question about SSRS, and it says that SSRS will still be around forever. Dynamic CRM depends on it. Another question is, how do you see Power Query being used in BI?
Yeah, excellent question. So, if you think of, the business intelligence development lifecycle, you have data extraction, you have data modeling, and data presentation. So Power Query falls in on that data extraction and that data transformation side. So it can hit all those various data sources, allows you to transform and shape it, and load that to your end target. The ability right now with on-premise SharePoint to not be able to automate that data refresh is a bit of a limitation, but you do have that feature and functionality with SharePoint Online and Power BI sites. And as we mentioned before, expect to see that to roll into the next version of on-premise SharePoint in somewhere in the middle of 2015.
Okay, and do you think the report viewer is for developer or the end user?
So the reporting services report viewer is certainly going to fall more towards the developer to make that feature and functionality available to the end users. Just consuming it is the end user, but getting that platform in place is going to be the developer side of the house.
All right, we appreciate your time, Anthony Martin. That's all the questions that we have.